Hello, premium listeners. It's time. It's time to fill your ear spheres with mind globules of wrestling information / observations.
This sphere globule theory is the new stuff in physics, by the way.
Yeah, people don't understand how up we are on modern physics and how thought works.
It's all theoretical. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't test any of this stuff, so it's just as good as any of the Brian Green or whatever the hell else those
What
guys.
the
are.
hell
Michio
are you
Kaku.
guys talking
Memories-
about?
Memories are basically like time smells. That's what people have worked out.
Hey, sounds good to me.
Yeah. Well, because if you think about it, I'm right. Thank you.
This has been Contesting Wrestling.
Yes, say you guys are so great every week.
Look, it's
and-
getting towards the end of the semester. My brain is turning into whatever the hell it turns into at that time when I have to grade papers and listen to students
Just give them
It's-
all B's.
We should
talk
also
about
just
stuff.
America should just shut down
asking me
in
questions.
December, August and December.
August and December.
Everybody should get 2 months off. Not have to do it. It's ludicrous to expect.
I mean, I
anybody-
do get a month off in January, but the stuff right before that is fucking hard.
Right.
All right, so,
So what
yeah,
are we, what are we
no,
covering
but
this week on the premium episode?
fuck. All right. So first of all, so this is the complement to the episode where we had Mitchell Fesh, the impresario of Extremely Serious Wrestling, on the show. And so we thought, first of all, we would watch some Extremely Serious Wrestling matches and talk about them. So we have 2 of those matches. One of them is from their show Warped Summer Extravaganza, which features Fetch's alter ego, Dr. Felix Kampfnut, PhD, in a match against his father, Mondo Pussy. And then the other match we're talking about is from the more recent Show of Honor for Love or Money, which sees the then IWTV champion, Orange Cassidy, defend his title against Shawn from Michaels. So, Evan, why don't you start us off? What did you think about these matches?
Sure. I mean, these are great. This is a lot more in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it before. I recognized some of these people from when I was like around doing comedy. Like Shawn from Michaels is definitely a guy who I saw on UCB shows.
Yeah,
and
we
stuff. I
actually
can't
saw
remember-
him on the UCB wrestling shows back in the day.
Yeah, he gets around.
I cannot remember his name to save my life, but I definitely
His
have seen him.
his
a
name's
bunch of times.
Riley. He's very funny.
Yeah.
If you're running comedy shows, find him. He's very good.
This is spectacularly well done. It's a I also watched because I couldn't remember. Okay, meta note. This week I had a real moment where I was like, "You guys, you fucking nerds." God damn it, because we we had the matches figured out that we were going to watch for the episodes we're recording today. And then I didn't check the chat for 2 hours, and I came back, and there were like 50,000 new messages.
We forgot we had to do this episode in complement to that other episode, so we had to kind of come up with the matches we were going to do on the fly. And there's so much XSW that's really good that it was kind of hard to narrow it down.
Yeah, but we weren't going to watch like hours of it and then, because we could do several shows eventually on it.
But I definitely had a big moment where I just wanted to give both you guys swirlies because I was so frustrated. Also, I'm swole now, so that's just as a person who exercises and is now swole. My body may look nearly identical to how it did 6 months ago, but that's not important. It's a state of mind.
But you're not big swole.
No, I'm mind swole.
He doesn't know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
Big Swole is a wrestler.
Big Swole is a wrestler. Ariel Monroe. She just signed with AEW a few days before the recording of this.
Yeah, she's cool.
She's more swole than you.
I'm sure. It's not hard. But anyway, so I watched. My point is that I watched a bunch of matches. And I watched
Yeah.
2 of your matches, Doc.
Oh my!
The 2 matches against the Big Floss Man.
I
One
got-
of which is a tooth extraction match.
Yes.
Uh,
Real moment of body horror right in the middle. I guess this is like an extreme comedy match.
yeah, an extreme
yeah.
comedy match.
Let me just, for those of you who haven't listened to the other episode and don't know what it is, Extremely Serious Wrestling is a comedy wrestling promotion. It is largely performed by comedians, not really trained wrestlers, though there are some trained wrestlers. And it's performed not in a traditional wrestling ring. It's a sort of ad hoc ring
Yeah, ad hoc's a good way to put it.
composed of athletic mats with caution tape around them attached to dowels that are themselves attached to traffic cones. It's an interesting blend of something like improv comedy and professional wrestling.
See, the best part is when people who are professional wrestlers look at it and go, "Man, that's fake." Yeah. And
There was something really funny
it
about
makes me
that.
smile.
When Orange Cassidy is wrestling Shawn from Michaels. And
Yeah.
we'll talk a lot about this match. But, in general, because they're not trained to really throw a really
Good
legitimate
working
looking
punch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The comedians, when they throw a punch, it misses by a mile, and the other guy just sells it, and it's fine. But it was funny in the Orange Cassidy match because part of his shtick, Orange Cassidy, in actual wrestling matches, is to throw these ineffectual kinds of slaps at his opponent where he's
Right.
not really trying at all. And he throws those at Shawn from Michaels, who doesn't sell them because he's not supposed to. And then Shawn from Michaels throws these punches that miss by a mile that Orange Cassidy does sell. And that was just a really weird combination of the contrivance of different forms of contrivance.
It's situationally appropriate, I think.
Well, it's a perfect setting for something that for like a sketch comedy kind of situation, because it operates on the same sort of thing where you've got like character based comedy is basically a character has a weird behavior and they do the weird behavior in a way that everybody thinks is funny, and then it kind of subsides for a little bit, and then they come back and they do the thing. If you take a sketch comedy class, they'll tell you a sketch is a lot like a song, kind of, where there's these parts where there's the verses and the pre-choruses where it kind of develops, and then the chorus is where is where the joke happens. The chorus is we're out of this cheese in the cheese shop. The chorus is the parrot is actually dead, like that kind of thing.
It's not dead.
And I've been
resting.
watching Astronomy Club on Netflix, which is hilarious, which includes a bunch of at least one teacher I took a class with
Oh, cool.
at UCB, and it's just a fantastic sketch show. And there's one sketch in, I can't remember which episode it's in, but there's a sketch, Resting Creep Face, that is like that is like one of the best like platonic ideals of a comedy sketch I've ever seen, where just like the structure and the way it works is like that is something that they would teach you in a 101 class. And it just so wrestling is the same thing where you're expecting the character of the wrestler to do certain things, attach their character. You're waiting for Steve Austin to do something disrespectful. You're waiting for him to summon beer. You're waiting for him to like punch the guy who won and
Hit
like,
the
stunner
Stone Cold
him.
Stunner,
Yeah.
Give you the old finger.
So it seems like a really good vehicle to have characters come in and be able to not only do the things that are funny about them, but you can structure a whole match around the characteristics of I don't know. I think that was great.
And you also have these sort of ridiculous conventions of wrestling to make fun of and
Yes.
draw attention to, as well as the entire history of hilarious bullshit that has occurred in wrestling to reference. And wrestling fans who know that hilarious history who want to hear it referenced.
Oh, yeah.
As we'll see in the Orange Cassidy match as well.
It certainly gets referenced in the Orange Cassidy and Shawn from Michaels match.
Right, just...
And it also, you've got like, it's great because like you've got a smart crowd and
Yeah.
you've got a crowd that's a lot more primed to like be part of the show, and which I think is something I said to when
Yeah.
we had Mitch in here, that you know, in a comedy show, like everybody in the audience like kind of wishes they could be part of the show somehow,
Yeah.
and wrestling shows are then a perfect vehicle for that.
Yeah, in the way this is sort of a natural extension of indie wrestling.
Yeah.
Where, you know, in indie wrestling, the crowd becomes more and more part of the show, interacts more and more directly with the wrestlers. Now, with this show, I mean, most of the performers are just wrestling fans. There's very little difference between the audience and the performers.
And since a big part of wrestling is the audience anyway, and the reaction of the audience knows their part when they're sitting there, and they want to be as big as possible as an audience. And unlike most other forms of entertainment, you're expected just to shout out random whatever comes into your mind, and the people on stage are expected to just react to it.
And as opposed to most wrestling shows where there's something that you really got to go for. You got to keep it kind of tight in terms of, you know, what's been planned and the outcomes that are expected. In indie wrestling, you have a little more room to respond to the audience than you do in big time TV wrestling. In XSW, because it really is improv, it's, you know, you can just at the moment create a whole new joke just based on what someone in the audience said.
Although it doesn't, I'm sure it's improvised to some degree, but it struck me as much more written than improvised.
Than most
Yeah,
improv.
Yeah,
for sure.
or like it struck me as being much closer to sketch.
It is
to-
definitely
yeah.
closer to sketch. It's definitely closer to sketch.
But at any moment, you can improvise. And
Sure.
you're not going to screw
Sure.
up the whole thing. Whereas in a wrestling match, you know, the wrestlers, in most wrestling, the wrestlers can't respond too much to the audience because they're really trying to do something to and with the audience. Whereas I think there's less of that in XSW.
Well, you kind of have. So even though in both comedy and wrestling, you obviously want to impress the crowd and you want to get the crowd on your side and everything like that, I guess in wrestling there's more of a sense that you kind of are going to tell the crowd what's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas in comedy, it's very much like, no matter how confident that you are, it's always very much like, please like this.
yeah.
Please tell me you enjoy this. Please tell me if it's funny or not.
And-
Because I guess you're trying to elicit visceral reactions in both, but in comedy you're really trying to trigger an automatic reaction
Yeah.
that nobody has control over. Whereas in wrestling you're trying to get people worked up, but they're not. I don't know.
They call it educating the audience in wrestling, which is you're right. The promoter and the promotion has to be good enough to capture an audience, but it has to teach the audience how they're supposed to react to any given thing. Nothing has any value unless you put the value on it. In comedy, there's inherent value just in laughter, and everyone laughs. But you don't know what's going to make person A or person B laugh. In wrestling, first you have to teach the fans what to react to. Yeah, you could think of it as like, oh, it's a big move or something flashy, but it doesn't have to be. If the audience knows that this simple thing means a lot, they'll react to the simple thing way more than they'll react to the more complicated, intricate thing if they don't know what it means.
I think some of the old school wrestling promoters and people in the business sort of complain that modern wrestling has given over too much control to the audience, and they're dictating what's happening a little bit too much, to the point where eventually they're gonna get tired of it because they've already gotten what they wanted.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's very true. Anybody, if you give an audience exactly what they want as soon as they want it, yeah, then they only have to be in their seat for a few minutes. And just people in general, you know, if you have any given product, like if you poll the consumers, well, how should I price this? The answer is going to be, it should be free, and I want it right now. And if you give the consumers that, they'll still find something wrong with it.
I think part of what makes XSW different is you can do anything. So there's like
Anything.
an unlimited, as opposed to wrestling that sort of has kind of limited parameters in some ways, in which like you can come up with new stuff, but it's hard to come up with new stuff that works. in XSW and comedy in general, you can just keep referencing whatever you want and doing whatever kind of like out of the box, science fictional or to some degree nonsensical stuff that you want to.
Well, it's a different covenant with the audience in that it's, the show that you are giving them and the things that you're at, the places where you're asking them to suspend their disbelief are very different. And when you really drop any pretense of it trying to be a physical competition, which is not to say that there's zero wrestling that happens in XSW. Like there's some stuff that definitely.
No, but I dig what you're saying. You're right. There's no pretense of it being real at all. Whereas even if a wrestling fan knows what wrestling is, they still go to the show thinking, well, the performers on stage are going to act like what they're doing is legitimate because that's what actors on a stage do. In XSW, you're going to a comedy club to see comedians. You're right. It is very different.
At the same time, and Fesh really talked about this, I think to some degree during the episode, what separates XSW from what UCB was doing is there is a lot more commitment to the conventions of wrestling.
Yeah.
And that and keeping at least some of those parameters is important for making it work as a pseudo wrestling show.
It is still presented as wrestling. It is still like the idea is that this is still a wrestling show that is largely going to work the way that wrestling does. It's just also supposed to make you laugh, and it brings in those cool parts of comedy where it's like, hey, all right, like cut us a little more slack in this regard, and like cut us a little more slack in terms of the realism, and then we will be able to deliver to you something that still hits a lot of the things that you love about wrestling, but also has this great comedic aspect.
So as far as this first match between Dr. Kampfnut, the psychiatrist, and Mondo Pussy, who is his father, who the story was that Dr. Kampfnut did not want to grow up to be a wrestler, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And he became a psychiatrist, and that created tension with his dad, and he was rebelling. He comes out with the Mondo Pussy mask, and he stomps on it. He doesn't respect his father's wrestling career.
Mondo Pussy is just a Mexican wrestler, right? Like that's the
gimmick.
Who's a cat.
Who's a cat? Okay, yeah.
I love when they're announcing Dr. Kampfnut. They talk about how he beat Ophidian.
He did. Ophidian came to XSW and he
Ophidian,
challenged
the
for the
Chikara wrestler.
Yeah, he challenged for the championship and he failed to win it. So Kampfnut got himself a victory over Ophidian.
He has some great move names like the Medulla Oblongata.
That the level of jokes based around the moves and the character and stuff like that was. There was a whole thing where Shawn from Michaels during his match was talking about like, oh, I've crafted a new hold to put you in. Like that kind of shit. Like
he's
that,
a master of both the art and craft of professional wrestling.
Like that's the thing. Like there's just once you have that, like you can just sit there for hours and fucking crank out those jokes.
At one point, Kampfnut takes out a cigar to attack Pussy with, and the announcers are like, "Oh, it's just a cigar." By the way, the announcers for this match are L.A. Styles and Shelly. What's her full name?
Shelly Chamblee.
Shelly Chamblee, and they're hilarious.
Yeah. Well, L.A. Styles' gimmick is that he's from L.A. He was a heel announcer, now he's a babyface announcer. Shelly Chamblee's deal is that she's a single mother of two, and the dad has the kids, so she can go to the wrestling show and drink a bunch of wine and leer at the guys. And she's hilarious.
That's amazing.
She hasn't been on the last couple XSW shows, and it's a shame because she's hilarious.
I just love when they're wrestling and they bounce off of the caution tape.
Yeah.
Like they have to pretend that they're bouncing off the ropes. Just all sorts of stuff there. And at one point, Mondo Pussy hits Kampfnut with a move known as the pounce and knocks him clear over the caution tape. And he takes a bump outside.
Much like the Keith Lee and Adam Cole bump.
There you go. The yeet, as you referred to it. Evan.
Good stuff.
And then he hits him in the nuts. Confnut hits Pussy in the nuts, and they call it penis envy. Again, so many of these. Armchair psychology when he hits him in the arm with a chair.
They've had a while to come up with Dr. K's stuff because he's, of course, he's been on all the shows up to this point. And he was really excited to do this match with his father.
Some of Shelley's great lines. When they've been hitting the arms a bunch and they're walking around, she's like, "Oh, so floppy these arms." They're both selling their arms, and when they Pussy grabs Confnut by the face or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, cat got your tongue," and she's like, "Yes, that is a famous phrase that everyone knows." It's kind of. Selling it in one way or another.
When you go into your matches with the Big Floss Man,
yeah,
like, is any of the dialogue worked out? Is any of the, like, do you just have the beats in front of you? Like,
well, my matches with the Big Floss Man were real. No, I'm not gonna.
I will say it was disgusting. How many teeth came out of both your face? I was not expecting
hundreds of teeth.
That was the third most blood I've seen at a comedy show in New York City.
You were supposed to win when you extracted one of your opponent's teeth.
Well, the ref didn't see any of them until the end there.
But he did see you with your bloody mouths.
You've seen wrestling. None of that matters. So me and
that's a big part of the show, right? It's like you've seen wrestling in terms of like drawing attention to the conventions. Like, oh yeah, the ref can't, put together cause and effect in any kind of reasonable way.
Specifically against the rules for him too. But to answer your question, like, me and Flossman, we worked like a 6-month program. We tagged, we fought. It was great. And we went in, we had, and this is like more scripted than when I have actual wrestling matches, for sure. We would put, stuff back and forth about what we would want to do, like just online. Google Docs are involved, and editing those Google Docs and figuring out what we can do physically and what we would have to, props that we would have to bring for it. Especially for like the tooth extraction match, a lot of that we had figured out already. You have to be flexible enough to roll with the audience, and if anything doesn't happen the way you planned it and all. But by the time we got to that, we were pretty comfortable working with each other. So, it wasn't completely rigid, but we had all the big beats put together. Also, you have to do something like that when you're doing comedy or regular wrestling. If you're going to be using a lot of props at certain times, you have to know when each piece is coming out.
Do you I can't believe I've never asked you this before, but do you have comedic rock radio DJ themed moves?
A couple of them. In XSW. I have the airwave clothesline. I'll wind it up several times like air's going on, and then I throw a lariat. And then I have the crossface, which is I do the chicken wing, and somebody reaches to the ropes to try and break it, and then I put the chicken wing on that arm, and I go back and forth with that a couple of times. And I'm not leaning too hard into the moves because I figure coming from like professional wrestling, everyone else can do that. I want to be unique on the XSW events, so that's. So I have a couple of them, but I'm not like thinking of them. I did see once Sean from Michaels was developing some of his stuff, and he's like, I have a couple of ideas for names. And then, like you said, he just pulls out a list and lists off like 30 ideas for things. Like, he's really funny.
I think that you should try to develop. You can have this one for free, okay? This one, right? The next one will cost you. But if I were you, I would develop a hold, some sort of hold called the Hotel California, like a sleeper hold, so that they can check out anytime they like, but they can never leave the hold.
I might do that.
Because then also as a rock radio DJ, you're legally obligated to play that
Hotel
song
California
once every 45 minutes.
The Hotel Cattle mutilation.
Oh,
that's whoa. We
like a
made
cattle
big jump.
mutilation with a sleeper. No, that's the name of another
That's
hole.
the name
Oh,
of
okay.
another- I wanted to make it a pun on an actual
It's like,
wrestling
wow.
move.
One of Bryan Danielson's early finishers is just a weird looking hold called the cattle mutilation.
The story there is with, I think, Doc, as you told me originally, or no, I think I heard it on a shoot interview maybe. So at one point he started using the move, and he's gonna have a match with Loki, and Loki's like, all right, so then you put me in the cattle mutilation, and Danielson's like, well, why do you call it the cattle mutilation? And Loki's like, well, that's what it's called.
Dedoy.
We'll show you a clip of the
I
hold
think
later.
the
It's,
Great Muta was the first one to do it. I don't know if he named it that. Sure.
So Orange Cassidy is a wrestler.
Oh, yes.
Like also does. Oh yes. All right. So watching these show, what percentage of guys are wrestlers and what percentage of guys are comedians?
most of them are comedians. The one event had a few more than average indie wrestlers on it, but almost all of the guys don't have any formal wrestling training. A couple of them took a class or two. It's like there's me, the abs guy that was with Shawn Michaels. He's a real pro wrestler that's in on all that. And Orange Cassidy has now been signed by AEW. He's on television every week.
We're gonna do a whole episode on Orange
we'll
Cassidy. He's amazing. He's one
Orange
of my favorites.
His character was fan-fucking-tastic.
Now-
Like, and also a character that shouldn't work because
Right.
it's normally it's really cheap for your character to just be like disaffected
Yeah.
or like just like
disassociated even sometimes.
like like the like another thing like you learn doing comedy really quickly is that it's not actually funny to have a character who is bad at the thing that they're supposed to be doing because
Right.
that's just the first thing everybody who does improv within the first 10 times they do a scene will do a scene where they are either a doctor that is bad at being a doctor or they are a patient seeing a doctor who is not good at being a doctor, and it's it's 99% of the time it's dumb and it's overused but every once in a while, I mean, nothing is funnier than somebody who's bad at the thing they're supposed to be good at. Like that's also on a very deep primal level a hilarious. That's why it's the first thing we always think of.
I actually had an ex-girlfriend who was like, "Oh yeah, my character would be the lazy wrestler." You know, like and that's what Orange Cassidy is in a lot of ways.
Well, he's been developing that character for years on the indies. And you're right, that could be the worst character of all time. But because it works, it pisses a lot of people off who are like purists of the art form or whatever. They're like, well, he's not even hitting the guy. He's just standing there. It's like, yeah, but he's just standing there. But he knows how to do that and do the half thumbs up. And like his shirt, hold on, his shirt where...
So first of all, he's clad entirely in denim.
Yeah.
With these like motorcycle sunglasses and except his t-shirt.
His t-shirt.
Which is a t-shirt of him wearing a t-shirt of him, and on that t-shirt he is shirtless.
Right.
I did not notice that.
That you can buy that shirt. That's the Orange Cassidy shirt.
Well, there's that guy at the show who's dressed completely as Orange Cassidy.
Right now,
I think there's probably more than one of those wandering around.
well, now he's like, because it's easy to cosplay Orange Cassidy. You don't have to like make a Randy Savage outfit. You just find a denim jacket and buy an Orange Cassidy T-shirt, and you're there.
Oh, this is unrelated note, but I get Shout Factory TV on my TV because we bought a TV and it just comes with a bunch of weird channels that are like YouTube channels that aren't cable or anything.
I have a Roku TV. It's like that.
And so we get the Shout Factory channel, which has like MST3K and like plays a bunch of stuff. They play the Weird Al show from the 80s, which was 80s, 90s.
The Weird Al show. I think it was a kids show in the mid 90s, a little later than you'd think.
Definitely a kid show.
Yeah, it was
really
like Saturday
awesome.
morning.
And I caught like the last 30 seconds because I just like had it muted in the background. I turned around and there was an episode with Macho Man Randy Savage where they were on.
I'd like
fun.
to see the two of them interact.
We should find it because I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere.
I'm a big Weird Al fan. He's he's a national treasure.
He is. He truly is.
Before we get deep into the Shawn from Michaels Orange Cassidy match, we got to mention a little bit about the end of this Kampfnut Mondo Pussy match.
Take it away.
Where first, Kampfnut is spanking Mondo Pussy and he's tapping out, but the ref is knocked out. The ref, Devin, does he go by anything besides Devin?
Just Devin.
He's great, by the way.
Yeah.
He sells everything really well.
Oh, he's
great.
He plays the character of the pro wrestling ref perfectly. He doesn't catch anything, and he knows how to do it. Just. And unlike in comedy, the guy that's bad at his job, every pro wrestling ref can't see anything or do anything, and he encapsulates it perfectly.
So while he's out or distracted, Justin Case comes in, who's the lawyer for Kampfnut, which is a play on the wrestler Justin Credible. I remember when I was doing E-Feds in high school, there was a guy who thought he was clever, and he called himself Justin Beatable. But unlike Justin Credible, where if you take his last name by itself, it's still a good thing. It's credible. That doesn't work for Beatable.
Also, he would have to be just unbeatable.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's your name? Just Done.
But he wasn't. He was just in because he didn't realize how English works.
That's not good.
So Justin Case interferes, but then everything goes still and black and white. On the video, they muted the crowd. I'm not sure how things went on the live show. I get they can't mute the crowd. I guess they just
no. They probably
cheer
just
through it.
an editor probably spliced it in, but I don't know. I'm not privy to that side.
It wasn't.
Of the IWTV production.
Anyway, he reveals himself to be Justin Time, who is able to stop time, and then interferes in order to free Mondo Pussy from the spanking. Mondo Pussy eventually puts Kampfnut in the lion tamer and he taps out. But I mean, it's just like to speak to the idea that you can do literally anything in these matches. You can have someone who stops time. You can have one character just switch into another character instantly, or into 3 or 4.
Why not?
As the case may be.
I think
awesome.
My comedy wrestling character would be, I'm workshopping this, but the Fundertaker.
The Fundertaker,
where I would be partying people to the grave. I would still come out and do the whole dramatic thing and roll my eyes up into the back of my head, but I would have like a big tiki drink with me, and I'd have like a big like party animal Hawaiian shirt, and I'm working on it. I'll pitch something to Fesh eventually.
Yeah,
Maybe he should wrestle the Glotimate Warrior at some point.
Perhaps. I mean, I destroyed the Glotimate Warrior.
Yeah, no, the Glotimate Warrior isn't much of anything.
So can we move on properly to Shawn from Michaels?
Yeah, sure.
Versus Orange Cassidy.
So beginning with the promo earlier in the show. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about abs.
Yes. Andrew's better body system, abs.
So he's, a large, rotund fellow.
Yes.
Who does not have actual abs, but the character is wearing a bodysuit with abs painted on, and then over that a rubber piece with more abs.
He has so many abs.
And then a fanny pack that has an abs print on it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a very good character.
He has a 26 pack, roughly.
Yeah.
Yes. And Shawn from Michaels is, again, a guy who works at Michaels Arts and Crafts store.
I don't think he works at Michael's Arts and Crafts store. He just buys things.
He just buys
He's
things.
an artist.
Kinda.
He's an artist. He knows. He's so brilliant. He knows how to piss the crowd off. He'll say things like, I got off the subway and stopped at the top of the stairs to check my text messages. He'll talk about how he's on his wife's health insurance, and it's great health insurance. He doesn't have health insurance because he's an artist, and that doesn't give you health insurance.
So he says that Orange Cassidy has won the hearts of the internet's stupidest wrestling fans, which is great because that's what a lot of people in the business think is, man, these idiot fans who like this guy who doesn't even do anything.
Oh, man.
And then Abs is like, yeah, I'm going to tag Jim Cornette on this right now. Because Jim Cornette is exactly one of those critics. So yeah, that's pretty much the meat of the promo, which is hilarious.
This is recorded before the recent Jim Cornette controversy.
What we're recording right now?
No. This
XSW
event that we're
show.
watching.
Oh, I thought just in time, did something screwy.
Cornette, for what it's worth, he still does his podcast. He's just closing his bubble around him, and that's whatever.
I see what you mean. The reference is no longer as
well. You could still
fun.
tag him. He'll just block you. People are
it
like,
was probably a more lighthearted joke at the time.
Exactly.
That was specifically what I meant. Where now you would think twice before just throwing in a Jim Cornette joke.
That's probably true. He's spoken of in a bit more serious manner of like, let's avoid this guy.
He is still doing his thing though.
Yeah, well, that's what he's doing. He was immediately removed from the NWA show. They scrambled to edit the rest of their footage to use as little of him as possible that they had already recorded, and they're moving forward without him.
And it strikes me that most of his fans aren't the sort of people who really cared that he said that.
Right, exactly. So they can continue to listen to his podcast and little else, and he can continue to do I don't care because I'm not listening to his show.
So in the match, Orange Cassidy rolls under the caution tape like he's rolling into the ring.
Yes.
Takes his IWTV title, which we should explain a little bit about the title. So IWTV is a streaming service that has a whole bunch of member promotions under their umbrella. Tons of wrestling, indie wrestling promotions throughout the country, throughout the world, really, have their stuff on the IWTV app and streaming service. And they have a championship that gets defended at all the promotions. And since Extremely Serious Wrestling is broadcast on IWTV,
the world champ rolled through, brother.
Yeah, the world champ came through to wrestle the local top guy, who's Shawn from Michaels. So he pulls his IWTV title out of his JanSport backpack that he carries it in. And he gives Shawn from Michaels the limp handshake, as Orange Cassidy likes to do. And one of the announcers is like, "Ooh, handshake. Are we in Japan?"
No, we are very much not in Japan.
No, we're at the Pit Loft on the west side of Manhattan.
Hell yeah.
So just to be clear, so if you are broadcast on IWTV, you're obligated to have their title in your thing at some point or another. Is Orange Cassidy is he somebody who's around? Is he on the card? Is he actually on the card through IWTV, or is he on the card?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just couldn't tell if you guys were being sarcastic.
No,
No,
very much
100%. He was the IWTV champion for a long time. He's not anymore. Now he's on AEW, so he can't really commit to the indies as much.
He still does some indie dates, but he's no longer the IWTV
Okay, so
champion.
he's not like a local New York
guy
or anything.
No.
Like
he's been around for years plying his trade.
Oh wow.
I mean, if he's local to anywhere, it's Philly.
No,
he's one of the top. Now, not even indie anymore because he signed with AEW. But before that, he was one of the top indie wrestlers.
Huh.
Yeah.
How did he feel about XSW? Do you know?
He fucking loved it.
That's why he does. He's been back several times.
Oh, that's
now.
awesome.
He was on the last AEW. He was on the last XSW show that we did a few weeks ago.
What is his AEW character like?
Orange Cassidy.
And
he's with a couple of his. There's a tag team called Best Friends, which is Chuck Taylor.
I already love it.
And Trent, Chuck Taylor, a guy who's an indie journeyman. If people are finally catching on to how good he is, and Trent, who was in the WWE for a cup of coffee when he was real young, made a thing of himself in Japan, and they're buddies, with Orange Cassidy. So the three of them are like best friends, and that's the deal.
He hasn't done much yet.
Except Get Over. He comes out,
he
stands
comes out
there,
with
and
them.
they cheer like the world champion just showed up.
When they did the Rick and Morty
does the same
thing,
deal.
he was...
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't had a match yet. So, well, he was in like their battle royal, but he hasn't had a real match yet. So he hasn't really shown what he can do. Like a lot of things in AEW, it's sort of like if you're in the know, if you're that big of an indie wrestling fan, you know who he is and you know what he can do. Otherwise, he's just this weird guy who keeps showing up.
Yeah, they're gonna unleash him at some point, and it's gonna be great. But right, he likes XSW. He's been back. He's done several shots, and indie IWTV at IWTV.live. They're doing great things for indie wrestling, and I think the IWTV Championship is a great idea. It's somebody who can have, raises the profile of the champion, raises the profile of the leagues the champion happens to go to, and it gives it a good gives indie wrestling something to shoot for.
It seems like a great way to modernize what was a staple of regional wrestling, which was like exactly like you said, have the champion go around. It builds the champion's name. It makes the local guys look good. And then now you've also got the added benefit of people who like to consume one particular indie league that's on IWTV will learn about the other ones.
Right. And if you say you're a big fan of the champion and they have a match in a league you've never heard of on IWTV, maybe you'll watch the show. Maybe you'll like some of those guys you've never seen before. And then maybe you can support more wrestling.
Now, the funny thing here, the sort of absurdity of having him wrestle an XSW guy as if it were a big deal title match is great, especially when they do like a paint off.
Yes.
And Shawn from Michaels is looking for his paintbrush and it's taking a while. And the announcer's like, wow, this is a big wasted opportunity right here. Like,
that makes a lot more sense to me now. Because I actually I didn't know that Orange Cassidy I just thought he was another XSW character. And then when he took his shirt off, I was like, you don't see a lot of comedians in that kind of shape. I was like, he must be an actor.
Insanely good shape.
I didn't realize that he was like a real deal
like
wrestler.
Seeing him live, it's like,
in person,
shit,
like up close,
0% body fat.
Oh yes. It's so weird when you see really, really in shape people up close and you're just like, damn.
He's one of those guys that does not get tired.
They have the paint off, and for Orange Cassidy's painting, he just barely touches the canvas with his brush, and everyone goes
his
nuts.
Timing is impeccable. He knows exactly when to dot the paper.
And it is the least amount of effort a human being can possibly put into an action and have it technically still be an action.
Yeah.
So did you notice how the crowd went nuts when he put his hands in his pockets?
Yes.
That's a big part of his deal in the ring, is wrestling with his hands in his pockets. And you will see some crazy shit when we watch some of his real matches.
So he can real deal wrestle. Like
he's incredible.
Yeah.
He can do anything.
He can do anything.
Okay.
He's great.
And so that's part of the thing that you'll see is, like, as I said, his character works because at some point in the match, and you see it here, he wants to win the match.
Yeah.
If he just didn't care the whole time, you couldn't really get behind him, But at some point, he turns it on when he's properly motivated, which happens occasionally.
Yeah. He wouldn't have been he wouldn't have held that title if he couldn't carry a very good match in the ring.
Like in this case, when it looks like Shawn from Michaels has actually won the title, that bothers him. And then he tries to, And so, I mean, we'll get to that in a minute, but I like how Shawn from Michaels couldn't break his glasses, but Abs could.
Abs could. He recovers some glasses.
And he takes a stamp and he puts it in the paint and he makes a stamp on Orange Cassidy's t-shirt.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh shit, it's a Shawn from Michaels shirt now.
Yeah, Cassidy was not too pleased with that.
Sweet Chin Visual Arts as opposed to Shawn Michaels' Sweet Chin Music is another great little reference in there. So the finish comes when he puts on what he calls the art shooter, which is the sharpshooter.
Right, Shawn from Michaels puts it on Orange Cassidy.
And we get a reference to what, Evan? Since you know about this?
Yes, the Screwjob. Yes. Yeah.
And
the Montreal Screwjob.
They go further in on this Screwjob than I thought they were going to, and I was at the show.
So, Cubicle Quinn Bickle, who's the authority figure for the promotion, which is, I mean, another amazing pun in there.
He was an intern. He had to win most of the company from Justin Angermeyer, and he did.
He rings the bell, he calls for the bell to be rung for the screw job because, hey, we're bringing the IWTV title to XSW.
Yeah,
Who wouldn't want that? Yeah. What promoter wouldn't want that? And so Orange Cassidy is robbed. Then Bret Hart's theme music plays, and we get Bret the Blickman art.
The layers on that is just
so
fantastic.
Well done.
In full Bret Hart costume.
Oh, full Bret Hart costume, ridiculous Canadian accent.
He took a discount bus from Calgary to get to New York. As you would, because you got to save money when you're a wrestler. You know?
Yeah.
So
Calgary
gravy
is
train's
really
not going to
far.
be coming in. Calgary is insanely far.
It's like saying I drove from North Dakota, except add another 500 miles. Like, oh man.
And then there's the whole gimmick where he's like, you can't trust video evidence because you can CGI that, but you can't CGI a painting. So he pulls out this canvas with like a stick figure drawing of the art shooter, and you can see, which you can't because they're stick figures, that Orange Cassidy has his hands in his pockets, so he couldn't possibly have tapped. And this is sufficient evidence to overturn the decision, though it's really his threatening cubicle that causes him to restart the match. And then we get this amazing flurry suddenly from Orange Cassidy, who always carries a bottle of orange juice. And so this is a reference. So mostly Japanese wrestlers in the past have used the mist, the mysterious green mist.
And by in the past, you mean Asuka on TV now.
Oh, over the years, yes.
Yeah, the mist. I will not hear a word against the mist.
Oh,
I
love the
mist
fucking
is a hell
mist.
of a gimmick.
I mean, okay, it's fucking Orientalist. Whatever. It's fucking cool. They missed someone in the face. They can't see. They missed them behind the referee's back, but then the ref isn't wondering. Back to the whole thing about the ref not understanding cause and effect. Like, why is their face covered in green paint now?
Where does the mist come from? Is this just like it's just because I was going to say
their superpower. It comes from their mysterious Asian.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say there was a great
Orientalism.
There was a great American who used the same technique, and he just called it pocket sand.
Okay, well, that's more like another Japanese wrestler thing, which is throwing the salt in someone's eyes, that Mr. Fuji used to do.
The salt, man. I remember when I was a kid, somebody came over to the house, one of my mother's friends, and he's like, "Oh, you watch wrestling?" Man, when I was a teenager, me and a friend of mine went to Madison Square Garden, and we hated Mr. Fuji, so we jumped the rail and threw salt in his face, and then they tackled us like it's not real, because we realized it wasn't even real salt that he was throwing, because that really hurts. It's like,
how old were they?
They would have been teenagers in the mid-70s. So place that in your mind.
So
don't ever do that. By the way,
no, don't jump in the ring.
Don't ever do that.
They have every license to just fucking kill you. Well, not kill you, maybe, but cripple you.
Bad things happen to people who jump in wrestling rings.
So Orange Cassidy has a bottle of orange juice. He'll take a swig of the juice, and he can keep it in his mouth for an amazingly long period of time while going through a bunch of different moves. So sometimes you forget, or you think, well, he can't possibly still have it in his mouth, and then he will miss the guy with the orange juice, as he does in this case. He missed Shawn from Michaels. Then he does a move that you should recognize from Roman Reigns' moveset, which
he jump punched him?
He Superman punched or jump punched abs.
I guess if other people do it, it's a Superman punch. When Roman Reigns does it, it's a jump punch.
Right.
And then he hits he ties Shawn from Michaels up in this amazing pinning combination, the mouse trap, which I don't think I've ever seen anyone kick out of.
Oh no, the mousetrap's a great little pin. I have not mastered it.
And that's it. And
That's
so
it.
Orange Cassidy retains the IWTV title. Because you can't screw Orange Cassidy. Screw me once, shame on me. Screw me twice, shame on you, as Brett the Blick Man says. But you can't screw Orange Cassidy. That's how the saying goes.
Anyway, check out XSW.
Yeah,
like if you
it
haven't,
was so good.
It's really something special. It's growing. I'm gonna be there as long as I can. I really love it, and the people who do it, you get good vibes.
So we have one more match
one more
to talk about in this episode. Because on the Fesh episode, we did the Oz debut, the infamous Oz debut on Super Brawl. This time we're doing a much more successful, though also sort of oddball character debut. In this case, it is the debut of The Undertaker at Survivor Series 1990. The match was a Survivor Series elimination match between the Dream Team, composed of Dusty Rhodes, Coco Beware, and Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart of the Hart Foundation, who were the WWF Tag Team Champions at the time, against the $1 Million Team, $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, accompanied by his bodyguard Virgil, Rhythm and Blues of the Honky Tonk Man and Greg the Hammer Valentine, accompanied by their manager Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart, and their mystery partner, who turned out to be The Undertaker, accompanied to the ring by Brother Love, a.k.a. Bruce Pritchard of podcast fame. We're still coming for you, Bruce Pritchard.
We're just waiting for the right moment to strike.
Yeah. Now, so this could have gone horribly wrong because the Undertaker, like, you say to somebody, "All right, so you're like a dead, like Old West Undertaker guy, like walk around like a zombie and don't sell anything," and like plenty of guys do that all the time just because they suck. But the Undertaker had to really he had to use his mind. He had to think about how am I going to make this work, and he did.
Nothing undercuts gravitas like a mullet.
Well, it was 1990. It was still in style.
It might have been in style, but it wasn't something that came with a lot of you know what I mean?
I do.
Like even in 1990, nobody was shaping their hair into a mullet and then being then getting on the news and saying 15 people died today.
He did lose the mullet within a couple of years, to be fair, but I see what you're saying.
And
gravitas is
and it is definitely a character that he aged into.
Yeah.
Because it is not the young Undertaker is too filled with energy, too bright-eyed, too smooth of forehead.
It's dark and edgy for the time period in WWF.
I can see that. Yeah.
And on the recent interview he did with Steve Austin, the first really out-of-character interview that Mark Calloway, who plays The Undertaker, has ever had, he talks about how he was really worried about what his character would be, because in the weeks leading up to the Survivor Series, they kept showing this giant egg on TV. And it did end up being something completely ridiculous and stupid, because on the Survivor Series, it was revealed to be the Gobbledygooker, a sort of giant turkey character.
For Thanksgiving,
But so Undertaker is sitting at home. He knows they're bringing him in. He doesn't know what he's doing yet. He's sitting there watching the egg show up, and he's like, "Shit, I'm gonna be the Eggman. They're gonna make me shave my head and shave my eyebrows, and I'm gonna be the fucking Eggman."
Was that a wrestling archetype?
No, but
okay.
the gimmicks were
was a
so
Batman
ridiculous
villain.
at the time. There was Egghead.
Egghead.
Yeah, maybe that's what he was thinking of. The gimmicks were so and everybody had a ridiculous gimmick, with the exception of Bret Hart.
Right.
Pretty much. That even Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, they put him in polka dots, and
and told him to shake his butt.
I will say it would have been great if the Undertaker had been made the Eggman, but still had the Undertaker entrance, where he just came in with the bald head, dressed up like an egg, and then his eyes went back into his head, still
So his eyes look like
Deus
eggs.
Irae playing on the organ.
Well, anyway, the DiBiase's team comes out. Well, the good guy team comes out. The DiBiase's team comes out. And DiBiase announces our mystery partner is The Undertaker. His first Undertaker entrance, a man who would be very famous for his entrance. And it wasn't, the kind of theatrics that he would eventually become known for, but he comes out, he looks his size, which some guys don't know how to look as big as they are. He projects, every inch of his, 6'8" or 9 or 10 or whatever. And, he definitely stood out very much with everyone else. And he gets in the ring slowly, and Brother Love takes off his coat and his hat and everything. And the first guy he gets to wrestle is Bret Hart. And he basically starts plowing through Dusty Rhodes' team. Like, he dispatches the Hitman, he dispatches the Anvil, he gives the tombstone to Coco Beware.
And he hadn't quite mastered the tombstone as he would do it later.
No, he looks like he murders Coco Beware.
Yeah, it's pretty awkward. And I think Coco is fine, but damn.
I mean, it looks terrible. And then Coco just kind of rolls out of the ring in a way that was like, oh, he died. He's dead now. He
gives Bret Hart what I think might have been the first choke slam in WWF. And that's also not quite what it would be.
Yeah, it was akin to a kind of a clothesline off the ropes instead of like the straight up and down the chokeslam would eventually become. The crowd was into it immediately. They immediately respected The Undertaker as the force that it was apparent that he was. He did not break his character even a little bit the entire time he was in there. It was very impressive.
I thought it was funny. So the announcers are Gorilla Monsoon and Rowdy Roddy Piper. And they act like they've never heard of The Undertaker before. They've never seen him, right? But Gorilla knows that it's called the Tombstone somehow.
Well, I'm pretty sure it was already called the Tombstone Pile Driver. I don't think The Undertaker invented that. He definitely made it his own, but I think that was already the Tombstone.
Gorilla seems to sort of like backtrack on it a little bit. He's like, oh, it's the Tombstone, which I somehow know that's what it's called.
That sounds like Gorilla.
So there's some cool stuff in this. I mean, I think the feud was $1 Million Man versus Dusty Rhodes, which is a very natural feud. The millionaire against the common man, son of a plumber. We showed you the Hard Times promo of Dusty Rhodes. That's who he was. He was a very blue collar kind of guy.
Yeah.
So that made sense. There's a few different things going on in this match. There's that. There's, I think, the testing out of Bret Hart as a singles competitor, because the match ends up coming down to DiBiase and Hart in the end. There's some great little teamwork from Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. They do a blind tag that's really quick and you wouldn't notice if you weren't paying attention, and then a cool like drop down into a power slam tag team move. Bret looks great throughout the whole match, as Bret always does, because he's the best.
Bret does everything very well, hence the excellence of execution nickname he would eventually get. And the crowd was with him. You could tell that there was like some momentum building there. It'd be a long time before they would really pull the trigger on Bret still. But back then they would make a decision and then not act on it for 6 or 8 months because they actually planned ahead, which is nice.
Yeah. But to your point, and to the point of this sort of still being like the, what do they call it?
Professional wrestling.
This is a podcast?
Stop it.
The Survivor Series.
The beta test of The Undertaker in some ways. He has a lot of the movements down where like he has his like big jump in the air that would eventually lead to his big jumping clothesline, but instead he does a stomp. He goes to the top rope, which is really impressive for a guy who's 6'10", and kind of steps from the corner onto the middle of the top, or a little bit on the rope, which would eventually transform into his walking the ropes like a tightrope.
He was a big fan of the spoiler. Don Jardine, who used to walk the top rope, is a very big guy to do that.
He talks about in the interview with Austin how he really had to sort of find the middle ground. He knew he could do all these big athletic things, but he had to figure out how to fit that into the character of The Undertaker. Because The Undertaker, still had to move very slowly, but then very quickly when he went into action. He does these really cool, like, zombie-esque turns. And he figured it out over time, but it wasn't quite there yet.
Bret Hart said in an interview years later that The Undertaker had said to him, upon finding out that they were going to wrestle during Brett's first title reign. Like, I'm really excited to be wrestling you because I can actually show people what I can do when I wrestle you. I can show my range. Whereas when he wasn't wrestling like Brett, he just had to be the zombie Frankenstein Undertaker.
He's sort of ineffectual in some ways for what the $1 Million Man wanted in this match. He eliminates Coco Beware. He eliminates Dusty Rhodes with the big double axe handle off the top and throws him out of the ring. But then he gets counted out because Dusty goes after Brother Love. Undertaker comes out after them and doesn't realize that the match is still going on. And as Gorilla's like, I'm not sure he quite understands the concept of these matches. So, the idea that they just, somehow like pulled him out of the funeral parlor or pulled him out of the grave and stuck him there, said, here, hit people. I mean, he does know to tag out of the match, though, so it's a little inconsistent. But he gets counted out, so that it eventually comes down to Brett and DiBiase, who have a great little exchange at the end. Brett does this thing that he became known for where he pretends to trip over DiBiase and hurt his leg, playing possum. And then when DiBiase's back is turned, he rolls him up in the O'Connor roll. He doesn't beat him, though, with the help of Virgil's interference. DiBiase ends up winning the match, reversing a crossbody into a pin. But Brett makes a great showing of himself, and the crowd wanted him to win the match, which is what's important.
People don't realize that Canadians are notorious for faking injuries. It's a whole country with Munchausen syndrome.
They're all just limping slightly if they think somebody's watching.
It's another kind of thing where like it's kind of a heel thing to do.
Yeah.
But the crowd likes Brett and hates DiBiase so much that it's justified.
Look, the common man's got to get a leg up on the ruling class somehow.
Yeah, they've seen DiBiase be so evil for years at this point. If somebody could get one up on him, that's cool.
Virgil's a whole other story that we have to tell eventually. The black bodyguard, but really manservant of DiBiase, who at some point does become emancipated. And that's a whole big storyline over the $1 Million title, that's a story in of itself too. The belt that DiBiase has. So years previous, he tried to buy the WWF title. He hired a crooked ref to get the title on Andre the Giant over Hogan. So after that WrestleMania 3 match, they have another match where because of the crooked ref, Andre wins the title and then sells it to DiBiase. And then the president, Jack Tunney, says, you can't sell the WWF title, and vacates it. So foiling DiBiase's plan. So eventually he's like, I'm just going to buy my own title and carry it around. And that's the $1 Million title, which was defended occasionally. Including in the match with Virgil. Virgil also, so Dusty Rhodes' real name is Virgil Runnels. And there's this story out there that Dusty was racist and that calling Virgil was an insider rib on Dusty.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It was definitely a rib on Dusty. I mean, everyone knows that.
And
Bruce
like also
Pritchard
putting
denies
him
it.
with Sapphire as his manager.
I don't know. Like, I don't know I've never heard a lot of stories about him being racist. You know, you can confuse him with Dick Murdoch, who there have been stories about was a card-carrying Klan member.
I mean, they were tag team partners. I don't know if they were friends in real life.
Oh no, they were friends, but Dusty got away from him. You know.
Gotcha.
They grew up in Texas being wild men together, and like Dusty said, like one day, like he woke up and realized the life they were leading, and he was like, I gotta get out of here, and he started moving around the country.
I will say there were not a lot of top black wrestlers in the NWA when Dusty was booking.
Certainly,
Ron Simmons did win the WCW World Title in '92, but was Dusty still booking by then?
No, Bill Watts was booking.
Bill Watts, who put over Junkyard Dog and Coco Beware.
He really liked how black wrestlers could make him money. As people said, the only color Cowboy saw was green, which is very problematic as far as I'm concerned. You know, the perpetrators of the transatlantic slave trade only saw green too, really, and that's the point.
But the NWA didn't even do that.
Oh no, the NWA was very white, very white.
I mean,
It's almost like representation doesn't really do the job if it doesn't also include power.
Right. How about that?
It's like that's why it's like inclusion is the deal is more important than representation, because representation exactly can just be the white boss still making money as opposed to actual participation in the power.
The one thing even involving race or like major storyline with a black person in NWA television that when I watched, because I watched like 86 to 88 or whatever, was with Pistol Pez Watley.
Oh yeah.
Who, and the story is this. So there's the Boogie Woogie man, Jimmy Valiant, who's a big babyface at the time, and he's hanging out with Pistol Pez Watley, and he says at one point that Pez is his favorite black wrestler. And Pez says, favorite black wrestler? What the hell does that mean? And then turns heel on Jimmy Valiant and becomes he was already sort of a stereotype, but he becomes like the stereotypical, like hateful black dude.
He changes his name to Shaska Watley.
Shaska Watley.
He was actually quite a good performer.
Oh,
as was Jimmy
amazing
Valiant.
Performer. Yeah, but that was a really ugly story.
That was the extent of race storylines, and then the Crockett Promotions.
Just how could you're a heel for like asking for like more respect than the like pittance that the white superstar wants to give you or whatever. Like
uppity, right? That's what that word is used for, right? Yeah.
So So I guess that's all there is to say about the Undertaker's debut. It, as silly of a character as it could be, Mark Calloway was a good enough performer to make it work. And while it wasn't fully formed yet, it was already pretty damn good. And the crowd responds to it.
Yeah.
People look scared in the audience. There's this cool hush silence. They react every time he gets tagged into the ring. They wanted to see more Undertaker after that.
The music is definitely also a real sharp contrast to the other entrance musics at the time.
Interestingly, so it's this like funeral march. The tempo is much faster than it would eventually be. They slowed that march down over the years,
and they added a lot of production to it. There's been dozens of versions of the Undertaker's theme, and as the years go by, they add a little bit to it. They make it more grandiose. They add a few more instruments. The slow progression of The Undertaker is one of the greatest long-term pieces of business they ever did.
One last thing about the other guys that were in that match. So, you have Greg the Hammer Valentine, who was a star for the WWF, star for the NWA. He was past his prime at this point. He had just become the Honky Tonk Man's tag team partner. The Honky Tonk Man being this like Elvis impersonator character who was also kind of past his day. On the other side of the ring, you had the Hart Foundation, who were the champions, but the Anvil was about to leave pretty soon. You had Coco Beware, who was a big star in the territories and for the WWF for years, who was also past his prime, and Dusty Rhodes, who was one of the biggest draws in wrestling of all time. And you have The Undertaker just very easily dispatch them. And he talks about it in the shoot interview, how for him it was like, he felt kind of guilty about it, that he was just like chucking the American dream over the top rope like he was garbage, and for him.
What a metaphor.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm
sure Vince, really understood and intentionally put all that together.
Vince knows.
But yeah, so it really was a changing of the guard at that point. Because the first stretch of the WWF story was coming to a close. The Hulkamania, they were shifting over. The Ultimate Warrior would win the title from Hogan, or already won the title from Hogan. That WrestleMania, they were going into the new phase, and the Undertaker would be a huge part of that for the next 15 years. 25 years.
Yeah, very long time.
We're old.
We're not old. The Undertaker.
The Undertaker's really old. Yeah.
Oh boy.
You seen that tweet floating around? It says next year 2000 will be 20 years ago, which is weird because 1980 was also 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to point one thing out about this match before we wrap it up is that you can see the referee on the outside of the ring is a very young Shane McMahon.
That's right.
And that's an interesting Easter egg to check out.
Alrighty, this has been Contesting Wrestling Premium. Seriously, go check out XSW. It's fucking hilarious.
Oh yeah,
it's
please
spectacular. Watch the matches that Doc is in first, then watch the other ones. But they're all great. Thank you. We will see you soon. You're the best.